La Amistad International Park is part of a complex of conservation areas that cluster around the Talamanca Mountains that follow the Panama-Costa Rica border. The Costa Rican section of the area, 500,000 hectares, was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 1983, with a recommendation that the Panama side be added later to form a trans-frontier property. The area includes the largest remaining tract of natural forest in Panama, and together with the Costa Rica portion, comprises the single largest natural forest unit in Central America. At least since the last glaciation about 25,000 years ago, tropical rainforests have covered most of the area in an assemblage of lowland tropical wet rainforest to cloud and subalpine paramo forests. The Cordillera de Talamanca is the highest and wildest non-volcanic mountain range in Central America. It was formed by the orogenic activity that created the land dividing the Pacific Ocean from the Caribbean. After a long period of marine deposition in the shallow surrounding seas up to the Middle Miocene, a period of marine volcanism began, which included the intrusion of a huge granitic batholith and the uplifting of the whole area to some 4,000 meters above sea level in the Quaternary orogenesis. The planoplain thus formed has been gradually eroded due to heavy rainfall, creating a rugged topography with many slopes inclined at over 60%. During the Quaternary, glaciers carved cirque lakes and steep valleys on the slopes of Tirripo National Park, the only area in Central America to show signs of glaciation. This mountainous system, covered by the country's biggest unaltered tropical forest, has elevations about 100 meters above sea level, comprising the Camuk Hill with a height of 3,549 meters and the Durica Hill with a height of 3,280 meters. The park protects the medium-sized and big basins of the rivers Ciebo, Cabagra, Mosca, Guineal, Singri, and Canasta. In terms of biodiversity, the area contains several hundred endemic plant species and one of the last major refuges for threatened fauna. The avifauna is also particularly rich, with some 600 species. No other protected area complex in Central America contains as many viable populations, species, life zones, or as much altitudinal variation. The Talamanca Range is estimated to harbor about 4% of the varieties of all terrestrial species on Earth. The region is also important for its high endemism on Lepidoptera and amphibians. The fauna is extremely diverse, with intermigrations from both North and South America. Studies indicate that 1 out of the 115 species of fish, 20 out of the 250 species of reptile and amphibian, 13 of the 250 species of mammal, and 15 of the 560 species of birds are endemic to the reserve. Tropical rainforests have covered most of the area at least since the last glaciations. Of the 12 life zones of Costa Rica, at least 8 occur in the park, including lowland tropical wet rainforest to cloud in the subalpine paramo forests, pure oak stands, lakes of glacial origin, and high-altitude bogs. The latter 4 communities are not found elsewhere in Central America. The area also contains all 5 altitudinal zones found in the tropics. Most of the main crest lies within the montane rainforest life zone, characterized by mixed oak forests, a dense, low and heavily covered forest with bryophytes, ferns, bromeliads, orchids, and other epiphytes. Below 2,500 meters, the lower montane rainforest life zone occurs, and the forest is generally more mixed. The Talamanca Mountains contain the largest tracts of virgin forest in Costa Rica. On high points along the ridge, at elevations above 2,900 to 3,100 meters, frequent stands of paramo, swamps, and cold marshes occur. The paramo located on Mount Camuk contains the richest and most varied vegetation, after Chirripo, in the entire Talamanca Range, and is the only one on Costa Rica that shows no sign of human intervention. The whole area contains a diversity of plant genera, families, and species, perhaps unequaled in any other reserve of equivalent size in the world. 95% of the land within the core areas is government property, but there are small scattered agricultural developments along the borders. Within the Indian reserves, the Indian population has exclusive rights to the land in perpetuity, but non-Indian settlers are gradually being relocated. Prior to the arrival of the Spanish conquistadores 500 years ago, Mesoamerica supported intensive indigenous agriculture and hunting. With the arrival of Cortes, indigenous populations were decimated by disease, warfare, and slavery, and some of their agricultural clearings were abandoned to regeneration, yielding in some areas a net increase in forest lands. At the time of the Spanish conquest, a number of Indian tribes inhabited the Talamanca Range. Their numbers were decimated by conflict with Spanish settlers and imported diseases over the following centuries. By 1940, only 6,000 Indians were left in Costa Rica, along isolated river valleys in still unsettled terrain. Since then, increased public and governmental interest in their plight has led to a gradual increase in their numbers and legal recognition of their land rights. These populations have experienced varying degrees of cultural contact for over 400 years, yet have retained much of their folklore, language, customs, and subsistence agricultural hunting and gathering lifestyle. La Amistad may be compared with two other natural World Heritage Sites in Central America, Rio Plátano Biosphere Reserve in Honduras and Darien National Park in Panama. All three sites are non-volcanic tropical wet forest areas, but Amistad, with its location between Darien and Rio Plátano, provides missing biological and cultural links between the sites. Only Amistad has pure oak stands, subalpine paramos, and high-altitude bogs. The biodiversity of Mesoamerica represents a confluence of flora and fauna from two biogeographic regions, the Nearctic of North America and the Neotropical of South and Central America and the Caribbean. North and South America were once two separate landmasses with independently evolved plant and animal species. Then, about 3 million years ago, sections of Central America rose above sea level, forming a land bridge between North and South. Species began to flow in both directions between the continents, and their interaction in this transition zone helped produce Mesoamerica's unique and diverse array of life forms. Additionally, the highlands and mountain chains that run along the hotspot's main north-south axis have facilitated isolation and speciation throughout Mesoamerica. Because the mountains have often posed an impassable barrier, there are considerable differences in species composition between the Pacific and Caribbean coasts. On the other hand, the valleys and lowlands running parallel to the mountains have long served as natural corridors for animal and human migrations. In recent decades, there has been important progress in regional cooperation and dialogue toward the creation and expansion of the transnational Mesoamerican Biological Corridor, a regional initiative aimed at conserving biodiversity and ecosystems, while at the same time promoting sustainable social and economic development. The initiative attempts to protect important areas for biodiversity and provide connectivity between these areas through biodiversity-friendly plantation forests, agroforestry systems, and private reserves, to allow for the dispersal of plants and animals. Mesoamerican countries have been eager to participate in the creation of the corridor because it provides a tangible goal in the face of daunting conservation priorities. Among the important protected areas that comprise this initiative are the Maya Biosphere Reserve in northern Guatemala, the Calakmul Biosphere Reserve in Campeche, Mexico, the Montes Azules Biosphere Reserve in Chiapas, Mexico, the Rio Bravo Protected Area in Belize, and La Amistad International Park and Biosphere Reserve in Costa Rica and Panama. Several years of work in the Talamanca region with the governments of Costa Rica and Panama and their institutions and people have highlighted a number of considerations that must be accounted for when undertaking such a planning effort. Change, information flow, political will, and financing are four of the more important of these. Large-scale physical change regularly occurs within the Talamanca region. For example, in 1991, a strong earthquake shook the eastern slope of Talamanca, triggering landslides, creation of unstable debris dams, flooding, loss of infrastructure, injury, loss of life, and forced migration into the more sparsely occupied areas of the region by a significant portion of the local population. This earthquake was not an isolated event. Talamanca lies at the confluence of the Cocos, Caribbean, and Nazca plates, and as a result of their movement, the region has averaged a major earthquake every 2.25 years in the 3¼ centuries since local records have been kept. Involving local people and institutions in all phases of the planning of natural resources is vital to the survival of protected areas, development in their buffer zones, and the conservation of biodiversity outside of those gates. Looking at a landscape for its integrative and scientific values is only one way of seeing the problems of biodiversity conservation. A lack of political will is often cited as a cause of planning failure. The planning efforts in La Amistad were fortunate, however, since if the creation of the La Amistad International Park and the La Amistad Biosphere Reserve had anything in its favor, it was sustained political will at the highest levels of government in both Costa Rica and Panama. This landscape dominates the region and forms a physical backbone that ties the countries of Panama and Costa Rica together. For millennia, this mountain range has provided a land bridge that even today allows the exchange of North and South American biota. It remains a refuge for a diverse flora and fauna, many of which are rare or endangered. UNESCO declared the area a Biosphere Reserve in 1982, and in 1983 it was included in the list of World Heritage Sites.